I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Jeremy Slater, the creator and showrunner on the spectacular Moon Knight. First of all, Jeremy, this ain't another brooding, grim, plot-heavy origin story about another mysterious Cape Crusader. So thank you for giving us something so unpredictable and unique. How are you feeling about the reaction to Moon Knight?
Immensely relieved. I'm a Marvel fan first and foremost. I've been at probably every midnight showing for every MCU movie going back 10 years. I'm one of those guys screaming his head off in Endgame at every single moment. So the worst thing you can ever do is take a character you love and then screw it up for everyone. And look, I was on the first Fantastic Four. I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to go in there with those big hopes and say, I want to make everyone love these characters the way I do, and then have it not really work out. And so, especially a project like this, that was kind of a 3-year development process, it's such a relief to have it come out and to be able to follow along on Twitter as the episodes are streaming and watch people sort of react to all the beats you were so excited to share with them, all the big moments and reveals. It's phenomenal. I had so much fun for all 6 weeks just watching the fans react and watching the memes and the artwork and people crying on TikTok. It was incredible.
I know, right? Like, I didn't know what to expect either. Like you, a Marvel nut. My whole family is. We just, the obsession is out of control, and so we were looking forward to this counting down, and then we're like, okay, everybody, Moon Knight's on tonight. Let's all sit down on the couch and let's just immerse ourselves. And I thought, oh God, please stick the landing. And you really did. Like, I just couldn't believe how desperate we were for the next episode to come out. So that this was, you were doing this like more than a year ago in Budapest and all over the place, actually, when you look at the locations. When you think back to that time, what was the thing that was most keeping you up at night, as you know, as the guy trying to keep the train running? Were there any particular aspects that were just extremely challenging on this particular project?
Honestly, every aspect of this was incredibly challenging. I wasn't really involved with the physical production side of it, just because I had to step away because Moon Knight sort of fell out of the sky, and I had a lot of other prior engagements that had to keep getting pushed back and pushed back. And after 2 or 3 years had gone by, people were like, "Look, you really owe us some scripts." So it was good and bad. It was bad in the sense that I didn't get to watch the magic come to life, but also good that I didn't have to spend a couple months in the deserts of Jordan in the middle of August when it's 130 degrees outside. So I kind of got off lucky in a lot of ways, and I just got to watch the footage from the comfort of my own home. But in terms of planning this and writing it, the writing process was probably a year and a half, and in that time, I think I single-handedly probably wrote between 1,200 to 1,500 pages of material, and that's not counting all the work from my writers that they did over the first 24 weeks. So you generate a tremendous amount of material because you're trying to see what sticks, and you're trying to see what Kevin responds to, and you're trying to stay away from what other Marvel shows might be doing. And so every show is constantly changing and being rewritten, or they get new ideas, or they hire a different actor, but that has ripple effects, and then it plays downwards, and you come back and you say, oh, this thing that we were planning, it's actually going to come on the heels of having 2 villains that are like this, or 2 villains that are like that, or a love interest that's like this. And so you're constantly having to sort of make these giant readjustments, just because that's how the Marvel machine works. There's so many balls that are constantly in the air, and Kevin Feige is the only guy who has it all mapped out in his head, and the rest of us are just trying to react as best we can. So the show was constantly in flux. It was constantly changing, and your job when you're working at Marvel is just to keep up, to just write and work as fast as you possibly can, so that you're not the thing that is slowing down this kind of runaway freight train.
Yeah. Whenever I hear people say, oh, when they diss Marvel movies or TV shows as like less than, that's ridiculous. What a creative place to be. It's a machine of creativity and unique possibility. Like, it's just boundless. As a fan yourself, I mean, what's that like? Honestly, it's an obvious question, but you're pinching yourself when you realize you have now created something that is such now a massive part of phase 4.
Yeah,
That's huge.
it's utterly surreal. I mean, I both my wife and I teared up when we went to California Adventure at Disneyland, and we saw people who had been waiting in line in homemade Moon Knight costumes. They'd been waiting in line for 2 hours to get a picture with Mr. Knight. And then Moon Knight himself comes out on the top of Avengers Campus next to the Quinjet, and he's doing his little cape flip, and people are just like cheering from the ground. And it's like, that's why you go through those 3 years of incredibly hard work. And you know, the development process is certainly not easy, and it takes a lot out of you. But that's the end result, is you get the opportunity to make something that can become some kid's favorite Marvel show or someone's favorite Marvel character. The same way I have my own favorite characters and my own favorite movies. You want Moon Knight to be that sort of inspiration for someone else. So to see the fan reaction, to see people lining up and cheering for someone who had only lived in your head for a couple of years, it was genuinely like a really emotional, really, this is the first time I've ever been part of a project that people actually A, watched and B, enjoyed. Everything else I've done in the past has either been big budget bullshit that everyone hated, or it's been, you know, stuff like my Exorcist show, which people liked, but we only had like 20 viewers. So being part of something that the fans are actually enjoying and excited about is a very new and very wonderful experience for me.
I just want, as an aside, your Exorcist show was so damn good, but that's another interview.
Thank you.
So you've mentioned in the past that when you were developing the show, you didn't really like Mark Specter as a character. Can you talk me through the early stages of when you were conceptualizing the series and the Mark character? Why didn't you like him, and did it really matter at the end of the day?
I read a lot of Moon Knight comics. Marvel gave me big binders full of basically every comic that had ever been made, ever been printed. But also, before I even got the job, I was just going on my Marvel Unlimited app on my iPad and just reading every single Moon Knight I could get my hands on. And the thing I always came away with is, I liked Moon Knight when he was in costume. I liked Moon Knight when he was cool and creepy and fighting people and doing badass things. But I never cared about Mark himself. He always seemed to be missing that one thing. You know, I care about Peter Parker because of the Parker luck. I care about Matt Murdock outside of the Daredevil costume because of his own struggles with guilt and his Catholic faith. Mark Specter was always sort of just defined by his trauma. He was always just a guy who was just sort of unhappy and tortured. And when I started putting the elements of the show together, I'm like, oh, this guy's a killer. Number one, this, which we don't see a lot of in the MCU. He pushes everyone aside. He keeps them at a distance. He's very closed off emotionally. He's a character that's hard to fall in love with quickly. You can thaw to him. You can grow to fall in love with a character like that. But I was like, I don't know how to hook people to get invested in Mark Specter, not Moon Knight, but Mark Specter right from the beginning. But I was like, but I know how to write a character like Stephen Grant. I know how to make you fall in love with Stephen Grant because I love that character. And if I can make you love Stephen Grant and then introduce Mark, who is the guy who's kind of saving this helpless puppy from traffic, then you're going to love Mark too, because we have the same goals. We want the same thing, which is to see Stephen protected and see Stephen happy. So right from my first pitch meeting to Marvel, I was like, everyone's going to pitch you that Mark is the main character. I want to pitch you something very weird, which is that we're opening with one of the alters. We're going to be in Stephen's perspective. He's our Peter Parker. He's the guy we're going to fall in love with, and everything else is going to flow naturally from there. And because Moon Knight is kind of a C or a D-list character, you know, he's not the Incredible Hulk. He's not Spider-Man or Captain America. You know, my parents or my grandparents have no idea who Moon Knight is. They probably still don't. And so that gives you some real freedom to reinterpret this guy's origin and his powers and come at him from a very different angle, versus if you're telling the Spider-Man story, you have to start with Peter Parker. You have to start with the spider bite. And I didn't feel we had those limitations on this project.
Just genius, because when it started, I'm like, oh, they're doing this. They're going with Steve and not Mark. And then like, when's Mark going to show up? Here he is. And then of course I'm constantly looking out for Jake, which we'll touch on in a sec. then you had the Mr. Knight costume, the Moon Knight, that Megan Casplik did an incredible job on that.
Such a cool costume.
Like, wow. So that's genius for starters, but also the dissociative identity disorder stuff was really interesting. I think it's something that you've taken it in a different direction. It's very dark. So talk me through, was there ever any trepidation from Kevin and the team at Marvel about taking the show into this very dark place?
No, honestly, Kevin was the one who was pushing for it. There were sort of, when you come on board a project like this, when they tell you we are developing a Moon Knight show for Disney Plus, we just don't know what it is yet, but they tell you, here's what Kevin likes about the character. And they kind of give you a little list. And the two things that because Kevin is always very hyper aware of not wanting to repeat past successes. He always wants the MCU to be evolving and to be sort of exploring new creative areas. And so the two things that he sort of zeroed in on with Moon Knight specifically is the Egyptian gods aspect, the Egyptology of it all, and the dissociative identity disorder. Those were the two things he looked at. And he says, we don't have anything like this in the MCU, so we don't have to worry about repeating ourselves or duplicating things. So he was pushing from the very beginning. This isn't a movie. If this was a movie, all that stuff would get kind of flattened out because you have to hit the sort of act 1, act 2, act 3 beats. He's like, we have time to make this a real character study, to go to some dark places. So they were pushing us right from the beginning. If anything, I was the one who was being overly cautious, and I really kind of stressed to all of my writers right from the beginning that we don't have the luxury that a lot of writers have, where you just kind of write something and hand it off, and who knows if it gets made, who knows if anyone watches it, who knows if anyone cares. It's like, we're gonna have millions of eyeballs on this, whether we do a good job or whether we shit the bed. People are going to be watching this and going to be dissecting it. And also people, when that many people are watching something, you know that some of those people are going to be going through really tough times in their life. They're going to be struggling with their own things. And they're probably not struggling with dissociative identity disorder, but they might have, but that can be a metaphor. That can be a stand-in, because they may be struggling with anxiety or depression or anorexia or a divorce or loneliness or any kind of mental challenge. Can be this show can be a metaphor for. And so I push from the beginning that, guys, we have a responsibility that what we're putting out into the universe here on such a wide scale, it has to ultimately have a positive and an uplifting message about mental health. The worst thing we could ever do is just tell a dumb superhero story about a guy in a cape punching people that inadvertently hurts really vulnerable or really sensitive audience members. And so that was kind of the challenge that we had to keep in mind every step of the way of, are we doing justice to this guy, to the actual story, to this character struggle of what he's going through, but also are we doing justice to the metaphor, to the experience that the viewers are going to take away from this? And are we putting out something that is beneficial or potentially harmful? And that was something that we were kind of calibrating every step of the way to make sure we didn't step over those lines.
I can't tell you how much that means to me and so many people, because not only was it so cool to be watching it and, it was so beautiful and amazing and immersive, but that mental health aspect, it's not something that we normally see depicted with such nuance and sensitivity. And honestly, and I expect that from maybe some art house thing that, 3 people saw, but not this. And that's why I just think, I hope people really appreciate that, because it really is a huge part of the show. And I love the way
Thank you. Nice.
The Spectre character, I've heard from so many of the team on Moon Knight how they were amazed, taken aback watching Oscar Isaac do that on set. And do that on the show. I was even amazed doing it on the show. I was trying to follow what he was doing, and just little glimpses, little ticks. I mean, what a talent. What did you think when you started witnessing it?
For the first probably year and a half of the show, before Oscar came on board, you're writing the character in a sort of creative vacuum, because we don't know who Marvel's going to ultimately cast. We don't know. You hope that they give you someone great, but it's like, but you may wind up with, I don't want to badmouth any particular actors here, but there are actors out there who suck, who don't have range, who can't handle transitions like that. And we knew in order for this character to work, you had to have that transition happen on screen. You had to be able to know who was in control of the body, just from posture, just from the look in his eyes. one of my favorite moments from the Richard Donner Superman is a moment where Clark Kent transforms into Superman, and he does it just by straightening up, and he just grows like 6 inches on screen. It's the craziest thing, and it's not a visual effect. And that was always the scene that I pointed to of like, we need to be doing that, guys. That is what this needs. And it takes a world-class actor to pull that off. And so when they told us they were in talks with Oscar Isaac and that he was creatively excited about I think this weight that we didn't even realize had been on our shoulders for a year and a half just sort of evaporated overnight, because we were like, one of the best actors in the world. He can, not only can he handle anything we throw at him, he's going to elevate anything we throw at him, and he's going to make it better than we ever possibly imagined. And he absolutely did. I think Oscar deserves every award that this town wants to give him. He's just a fucking rock star, man, and such a nice guy. I honestly don't think Moon Knight would have worked with any other actor. I cannot imagine a single other person in that role now.
Yeah, I've always been a fan, but after this, I just can't believe the lengths he was able to go to just imbue this character with this like vulnerability, and he's super tough as well as a killer. There's just so much going on, and the Steven character is so lovable, and then of course Jake. It took a while for us to finally get to the Jake. So talk me through that choice.
The choice was just from the beginning. I told everyone, like, look, we can't have Jake in the show. He's going to be the teaser at the very end, because the fans are waiting for Jake. If he doesn't show up. But I was like, this show will only work if by the end of it we buy the emotional bond between Mark and Steven. We have to get them to that point where Steven sacrifices himself at the end of episode 5, and Mark brings him back in 6, and the two of them really come together. And if that doesn't land on an emotional level, then nothing else in the show matters. And I told everyone from the beginning, and I can do that with 2 characters. I can't do that if I'm balancing 3. If you lose Steven at the end of episode 5, but Jake is still standing there at Mark's side, it's kind of fine. It doesn't have the same loss because he's not alone. So I just knew that Jake would be too much too soon. It's the frog in the boiling water, where you have to get the audience used to this particular relationship and this dynamic, and then you can twist it, and then you can introduce Jake and use him as a sort of spoiler to kind of blow up whatever happy equilibrium they've now built between them. So to me, that's what's really exciting about Jake Lockley, is that we kind of still know nothing about him other than the fact that he has some sort of relationship or arrangement with Khonshu, and he obviously seems much more on board with Khonshu's sort of violent methodology than either of our 2 main guys. And I think whoever tells the next Moon Knight story, whether that's me or someone else, whether that's in another show or a film or showing up in someone else's show, to me, that's what I'm most creatively excited to see. Where the story goes in the future is just Jake is just going to be a stick of dynamite just dropped into these guys' lives whenever they realize that he actually exists and he's there, and he's bringing Khonshu along for the ride. And so yeah, I sympathize with everyone who wants more Jake, because I want more Jake too. But I think you'll get him someday. I just don't know what form that's going to be.
Yeah, I think, look, you've made these very particular choices, calibrated just right. They could have gone completely pear-shaped. They didn't, thank God. So final question, you've touched on it. So is there scope for another season? Do you know if there's going to be a movie? Are you involved? Can you just tell me everything, please?
The honest answer is I have no idea. I have not talked to Marvel at all. I know that Oscar is not under the same sort of contract that most Marvel actors have. So it's going to require 2 things. It's going to require Kevin Feige wanting to see more of Moon Knight, and what format he wants that to be in. And it's going to require Oscar wanting to return to that character and having more stories to tell. And so I think if you see Moon Knight again, it's not going to be a money grab sort of situation. It's going to be another team of artists and collaborators kind of coming together to tell another story. I have no idea what form that will take, whether that's another show or a movie, but I'm hopeful that we'll see it someday, just because I love Moon Knight and I want to see more of him in the MCU. But it's really up to those 2 guys.
But I mean, if they put their hand up and said, "Hey, Jeremy, you want to come along?" You wouldn't say no necessarily, right?
Oh, they've got my phone number, man. Anytime Kevin Feige calls me, I'm picking up that call. I love the MCU. I would love to do as many things in the MCU as I can, and whether that's Moon Knight or I've told them, give me your weirdos, give me Excalibur, give me Devil Dinosaur, give me Man Thing. Like, I don't care who it is, I'll write whatever you guys want. So I would love to be involved with the MCU again in some other format or some other fashion. But until that phone rings,
put it out there. That's right. Can we keep Kevin Feige in like locked in a hermetically sealed room, because there's so much going on in here that I just want him to keep creating. And can I manifest perhaps maybe a Scarlet Scarab miniseries? Let's go with that.
Okay? How cool would that be? Like a Scarlet Scarab with Taweret the Hippo, like tagging along.
Yes,
like,
thank you.
I would watch that show religiously. And I think May Calloway is so insanely talented, and I think Layla became such an audience favorite by the end of that show that, again, she's another character that I will be shocked if we don't see her again in the MCU in some capacity, but I have no idea what that capacity is going to be.
All right, so we all have to be patient. It's going to take some time, obviously, but in the meantime, we can just watch Moon Knight again. Jeremy, congrats on some really strong work there. That was insanely good, and I look forward to seeing more from the mind of Jeremy Slater.
Oh, thank you so much. That was such a nice thing to say. This was really fun.